just like a stone is oblivious to the feelings is oblivious to the disparagement, so too the dead have no awareness of what's going on. This goes back to our back and forth discussion whether the dead are aware of what's going on in this world. So according to this position, the dead are oblivious to what's going on. Ika da'amri delo yadi. So some say that they don't know what's going on. V'ika da'amri diyadi v'lo ichbaslu. Others learn that they are aware of the disparagement, but they couldn't care less. What? It's going to bother me. Like it's like a little. If my little 2-year-old says a not nice word, right? So it's going to bother me. It's the same thing that if they're in the olam ha'emes, who cares what they're saying about me down in this world? So the Gemara says, Eini, is this really so? V'ha'amar Rav Papa chad ishtoi milsa basrei demar Shmuel v'nafel kanya metalala u'bizal arnaka demoche. But there was once a Maisa where someone said something disparagingly after the death of Shmuel, and as a result, a certain kind of stick of a roof, I guess from a thatch of a roof, fell off the roof, hit him on the head, and pierced a membrane of his brain, and killed him, obviously. So you see that there's divine punishment, and Mar Shmuel probably was pulling the strings there, and was upset at the guy. So the Gemara says, "Shiny tzurva me rabbanan dekut shabrichu tova biyakare." The answer is that that's different. That wasn't Mar Shmuel himself who was instrumental in this fellow's death. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo va'atzmo, who said that I will not tolerate the disparagement of a gadol, the disparagement of a great Talmud Chacham, even after his death. And it was Hashem bringing retribution, but it could be that Mar Shmuel himself was completely oblivious or knew about it and didn't care. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi kol ha'mesaper achar mitasin shel talmidei chachamim nofel begehenim. So the Aruch, if you look at the margin note over here, says the words mitasin shel talmidei chachamim does not mean the bed of a Talmud Chacham, but rather it means the hataya, that the leaning, like Rashi, like the Aruch says, kolomar nata miderech hayishara, that if you suggest that you see a great rabbi who has turned away from the proper path, and you continue to disparage him or think ill of him because you've seen him do something questionable or inappropriate, then you will fall into Gehenna if you persist in your judgment of him. Shenamar v'hamatim al kalkalosam, that those who are mateh, meaning that those who judge those who may have done something that is questionable, yolichem Hashem es poalei ha'aven shalom al Yisrael, that Hashem will take these people and thrust them into the lower levels to create peace upon Israel. Afilu b'sha'a sheshalom al Yisrael, and that means that even at a time of peace, where no one else is being harmed in Klal Yisrael, everyone is living prosperously, Yolichem Hashem es po'alei ha'aven, God will take these sinners who think ill of Talmidei Chachamim, who may have done something questionable, and will thrust them into Gehenna and make their lives miserable. And related to this is Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael. Now, so the question, of course, is, well, if you've seen him do something inappropriate or questionable, well, then what's wrong with thinking ill of him? The answer is, of course, is that you have to assume that even if what he did was inappropriate, he must have rectified his behavior by now, and then he's done tshuva. And related to this is Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, Im Ra'isa Talmud Chacham Sha'avar Avera B'Layla Al Tehara Acharav B'Yom Shema Asa Tshuva. So if you see a Talmud Chacham that does an Avera at night, do not think ill of him the following day, because perhaps he's done tshuva. So the Gemara says, Shema Sal Gedaitach? What do you mean, maybe? So that's enough of a reason for me to completely eliminate every thought. Elavadai Asa Tshuva. But no, we have to assume that he for sure has done tshuva. V'hani mili b'devarim shebegufo. Aval b'mamona ad mahadr l'mari. But that's only true when it comes to inappropriate behavior ben adam la makom. But if there is outstanding financial issues, then you can't just be moichel the Talmud Chacham. The Talmud Chacham has as much liability as anybody else. No one should think that this is a dispensation, that if you feel that a Talmud Chacham owes you money, you shouldn't take him to Beis Din. Of course you should, and make sure that you get back whatever is owed to you. V'amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi b'chaf daled makomos based in Minadim al kavod harav. That Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that there are 24 places that you can find in Shas. In other words, if you look through Mishnayos, you'll find 24 instances where Chazal would put a person into Cherem, put a ban on an individual if he violates the honor of a great rabbi. The Kulon Shaninu b'Mishnasenu, you can all find them in the Mishnayos. Amrle Rebbe Lazar, Heicha, so where can you find these 24 places? Amrle L'chi Tishkach, so he said back to him, what, you think I'm going to spoon feed you? Go and find it. If you look, you'll find. So Nafak Dak V'Ashkach plus. He went and he was only able to find 3 instances in Mishnayos where the language of nidui is used for someone who treats a rav inappropriately. Hamazalzel b'netilas yadayim. So one is that now kavod harav over here doesn't just mean mistreating a Talmud Chacham, but it also means violating the words of Chazal. Kavod Rav is also kavod of Chazal and their institutions and their gzeros. So one is Hamazalzel b'netilas yadayim. One is that if a person disparages or makes light of the institution of netilas yadayim. The second one is v'hamasaper achar mitasan shel talmidei chachamim. If a person speaks ill or thinks ill of a Talmud Chacham after he's seen him do something that is questionable, and v'hameigis daito klape maila. And if a person has a sense of gasus, a sense of arrogance in the face of the Almighty, which we'll explain momentarily. Hamasaper achar mitasin shel talmidei chachamim maihi. What's the Mishnah that talks about the punishment for speaking ill of talmidei chachamim? Ditnan hu haya omer ein mashkin la loes hagiores veloes hamishuchreres. That he, which is referring to Akavia, I believe is I say the Rashi says, I believe says it's Akavia ben Mahalalel, that he used to say that you don't give to drink a giores, meaning we were talking about the waters of the Sota here. If the woman who is accused of adultery is a giores, or if she's a shifcha mishuchreres, she was previously a non-Jewish shifcha kenanis, and then she was emancipated and went through conversion in the process, and a man marries her, then the halacha is that she is not given waters of sota to drink. And it's derived from the verbiage in the psukim, which seems to imply that it has to be b'nei Yisrael, Jews from birth. V'chachamim omrim mashkin, and the chachamim disagree, and they say that you do give to drink. So v'amru lo, so they said to him, Ma'isa b'karkomis shivcha mishucheres b'Yerushalayim v'hishkua shemaya v'avtalion. So they said to Akavia, they said, let us prove to you that you're mistaken, because there was once a story about this woman whose name was Karkamis, and she had been a freed servant in Yerushalayim, and she was accused of being a sota, and Shemai and Avtalion, the 2 great Tanoim from an earlier age, gave her to drink the waters of the sota. V'amr lahem, so Akavia's response to them was, Dugma hishkuha. Oh, that's only because Shemai and Avtalion found someone who was similar to them. In other words, it was their sympathy for a giores, for a convert, because they themselves were descended from converts, and they bent the rules because of their sympathy towards converts, because of their own personal pedigree. So this is a very brazen statement to say that a great Tana would change the rules because of personal biases. So as a result, v'niduhu umeis b'niduyo v'saklu based in es arono. So they put him into Cherem. He died in that state of Cherem, and not only that, but it has his levaya. They stoned his casket as a sign that he had died in a state of a ban. Okay, so that's case number one. That's one case of that if a person thinks disparagingly or speaks disparagingly about a Talmud Chacham, this is what happens. He gets put into Nidu. He says, because this is a Mishnah, this Akavia ben Mahalalel, we'll see that the Gemara is going to change its position. But they're saying this about the great Akavia ben Mahalalel of Pirkei Avos. They're saying this about him. Now this is a Mishnah in Idios. Now the next case is V'hamazalzel ben Atilas Yadayim Mai. What's the case of a person who does not treat Netilas Yadayim properly, did not. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Chas v'shalom she'akavya ben Mahalalel nisnada, she'ein azorin in elas al kol adam b'Yisrael b'chachmu v'tara v'yiras chet ka'akavya ben Mahalalel. He says, God forbid that we should ever suggest that Akavya ben Mahalalel was put into Nidui. He says, after all, we know that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when Akavya was still alive, it was known that you could close the doors of the Azar, of the courtyard to the temple, and you could find thousands of people, throngs of people inside the courtyard, and you would not find one person that could rival Akavya in wisdom, in purity, and in fear of sin. So how could you therefore suggest that Akavya ben Mahalalel would be so callous as to say something like that about Shemai and Avtalia? So Ella, es mi nidu, es Elazar ben Chanoch. But rather, the person that they put into Nidui was a man named Elazar ben Chanoch, shepikpek benetilas yadayim, that he was questioning he had doubts about the halacha of netilas yadayim that was instituted by the Chachamim. And when he died, the Beis Din sent a message that they should place a large stone on his aron, just like when a person gets a skila, they place a large rock over his body. They wanted to show that this person was worthy of this kind of punishment. This teaches you that if anyone was put under a ban and died in that state, that Beis Din is supposed to stone his casket, and so this is case number 2 about Netilas Yadayim. Hamegas daito klape ma'ila maihi, that if a person is arrogant in the face of the divine, what does this mean? Ditnan shalach lo Shimon ben Shetach lechoni hama'agel tzarech ata lihisnados. That you know the famous story in Tainus about Choni HaMa'agel. In a time of great drought, Choni HaMa'agel, he was called he got the title Ma'agel because when he drew a circle around himself and said to God, looked up to heaven and says to God, I'm not leaving this circle until you bring rain. And this was considered to be a very brazen act, and that's why Shimon ben Shetach, the great Tana, said to him, you really should be put into Nidui, because you're megas daito klapi makom, you're acting chutzpahdik before Hashem. The ilmoli choni ata gozrini alecha Nidui, and if you weren't for the fact that you were choni, I would put you under a ban. Avol ma es sha'ata mischate lifnei hamakom, but what can I do that you're mischate? And the margin note says, it says, what's the word mischate over here? I'm just trying to find Rashi. Mischate lashon chote nakel belibo lachto la'aviv. That what you do is you act inappropriately before Hashem. I refer you to the margin to see other pshatim. Ve'osa lecha ritzono keben shemischate lifnei aviv ve'osa lo ritzono. And yet, despite the fact that you act mischievously or you're a wild kid, right? Your father still has compassion for you and still listens to you. And about you, the pasuk says that your father and mother will rejoice, and those who gave birth to you will be filled with mirth. So basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you too much, but really you do deserve to be put into Nidui. So therefore, you see that if a person is chutzpahdik to Hashem, he deserves to be put into Nidui. So for the Gemara, V'su Leka, are those the only 3 that Rebbe Lazar was able to find? There's more. Why did he stop at 3? The Ha'ika, the Tani Rav Yosef, there's a brisa that Rav Yosef taught that Tudus, Ish Romi, Hinheges b'nei Romi lahachilan gediyin mikulasin b'leilei Pesach, Psachim. Todos was one of the leaders of the Roman Jewish community, and he instructed the Jews of Rome that they could eat roasted lamb that was completely intact, looking like a korban Pesach, on the night of Pesach. No, this was after the temple was destroyed, or it was either that or it was outside of the temple environs. It was in Rome. And he gave instructions that people could have a roasted, fully intact lamb on the night of Pesach. So Shalach le Shimon ben Shetach il mole todos togos reini alecha nidoy shatamachalis Yisrael kachim b'chutz. And Shimon ben Shetach sends him a message. I believe this is when the temple is still standing, but it's outside the temple, right? And he says, if it weren't for the fact that you were Todos, the great Todos, I would have to put you into Nidoi, because you're feeding Jewish people kudshim outside of the temple. Now, it doesn't literally mean kudshim, because everyone understood that this was not a korban, but it gives the appearance of being kudshim, and therefore you're doing something that's wrong. So so you see, here's another example of where you violate you do something that has the appearance of kudshim b'chutz. Here too, you deserve to be put into nidui. So why isn't that listed as well? So the Gemara says, "B'mishnah seinu kamrinon, v'ha b'raisi." The answer is that Rebbe Lazar didn't list that because it's a brisa, it's not a mishnah. We're talking about things that you can infer from the mishnah. Uvamasnisin leka, you mean there's no others in the mishnah? V'ha'ika haditnan. What about the following mishnah from Idios, that it says chaschu chulios b'nasan chol ben chulia l'chulia? That if a person has, this is the famous tanur shel achnai. Yeah. This is an oven, an appliance basically, that has been disassembled, and when you put it back together, you don't permanently reassemble it, but you put it together by placing sand in between the parts, such that you allow it for its future disassembly. So the question is, does it have the status of a kli such that it's makabel tumah or not? So Rabbi Eliezer mitayer v'chachamim mitamim. Rabbi Eliezer says that it's tor, it's not makabel tumah, and the chachamim say that no, it is tameh. B'zeu tanur shel achnai. And this is the famous tanur shel achnai that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua debated about with the Chachamim in Bava Metzia, where we conclude with the words Lo Vashamayim, right? It's famous Gemara. So my achnai, why is it called achnai? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Malamed shehikifuhu halachos ka'achnai zeh b'tima'uhu. It means that they surrounded Rabbi Eliezer with all these arguments, halachic arguments as to why it should be tamei, like an achnai, like a serpent who wraps itself around its victim. And the final result, they were prevailed and they made it tamei. V'tanya osa hayam heviu kol taro shetir Rabbi Eliezer v'sarfim lefanov. And that day, because Rabbi Eliezer refused to submit to the final ruling of his colleagues, they took all of the things that he had declared to be tahor and declared them to be tamei, and ulbasof barchu. And eventually they put him into cherem. They put him under a ban because he refused to submit. So you see, again, over here you have another Mishnah which talks about a cause for putting someone into nidoi. Afilu hachei nidoi b'masnisin lo tanan. So the Gemara says, even though it's true that the story of Tanur Shel Achnai is mentioned in the Mishnah, but the postscript of that story, which is that they put him into nidoi, that part is not mentioned in the Mishnah. That's only in a brisa. So Ela b'chaf daled makomos heicha mishkach asla. So the question is, we know that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said that there are 24 places in Mishnah, and Rabbi Lazar was only able to find 3. So the answer is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi medalma milsa lemilsa, Rabbi Lazar lemedalma milsa lemilsa. So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi felt that there were other places, like Rashi says, Kol makom shera b'masnisin shenechlak hayachid ala rabbi machlokas gedola, o echad min hachachamim shemedaber kasha keneged gadol heimenu omer roi haya ka'an nidor. He says any time where there was a very serious controversy in the Mishnah that is detailed in the Mishnah, and any time where you see that an individual speaks in a very bold way against his colleagues in the Mishnah, so then that's where Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, through extrapolation, that this is a place where there should have been a nidor. Person should have been placed under a ban. And Rabbi Lazar simply didn't make those kinds of extensions or extrapolations from those stories, and that's why he was only able to find 3 explicit mentionings of nidoi. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says there are more allusions to nidoi, even though they're not mentioned explicitly. Let us go on. No se hamita v'chilu feihem. The Mishnah had said that those people who are transporting the casket and v'chilu feihem, and others who are waiting to sort of relieve them and continue, basically take the casket from them and continue along the way. So all of these people are pater from Kriya Shema and from tefillah and from tefillin and mikol mitzvahs amuros b'Torah. Tanu Rabbanon, ein motzinas hameis samuch l'kriyas Shema, ve'im hischilu ein mafsikim. So the Brisa says that we do not begin transporting the dead. We don't begin the Levaya if it's right before Zman Kriyas Shema. In other words, if the morning's about to begin and we're about to say Kriyas Shema, and there's no time, you don't have time to say Kriyas Shema, in other words, before the procession starts, so then, in other words, you wait a few minutes before you start the Levaya. Give people a chance to say Kriyas Shema, and then proceed, so that you don't have to remove from them the opportunity to do the mitzvah. But if you already started the Levaya, you don't interrupt it in order to allow people to say Kriyas Shema. But isn't there a story that they began the Levaya of Yoseph right before Zman Kriyas Shema, and they didn't wait? Our answer is Adam Chashuv Shiny. An important person like Rav Yosef is different. We want to show that he's Chashuv. Shelifnei Hamita v'shela'achar Hamita. And then the Mishnah had also said that Es Shelifnei Hamita ve'es shela'achar Hamita. You have people that are in front of the casket and that are behind the casket. In other words, there are some people that are waiting to have the casket brought to them, and some people who have already passed the casket from themselves already. So, and the Mishnah had said, those who are waiting to engage in the transportation of the casket, Sarach Behem Piturim, that as long as they are needed in order to transport the mace during the Levaya, they're patur from Kriyas Shema. Ve'esh shela'achar hamita tzarech bahem chayav. And the people that are behind the mita also, even if they've already transported the casket, if they like Rashi explained on the Mishnah, afim tzarech bahem chayavim holshik for yotzi de chavasa min hameis, that since they've even though they've already, even though they say that we still may need you, but since they've already fulfilled their mitzvah of halvoyas hameis, they're chayiv in Kriyas Shema. So Tanu Rabbanan, ha'oskin behesped bizman shehameis muta lifneihem nishmatim echad v'korin. That those who are engaged in the eulogy, in other words, you're at the Levaya already, you're sitting down and you're listening to the words of Hesped, and you're going to be one of the speakers, but it's time to recite Kriyas Shema. So if you're not the one presently eulogizing, you should slip out the back for a few minutes, recite Kriyas Shema, and then you can come back. That if the mace is not right in front of us presently, in other words, it's either right before or right after the Levaya, so the people who are at the Levaya can sit and recite Kriyas Shema, but the Avel himself, because of his aninus, then he has to sit and be silent. Everyone else will arise and daven Shemona Esrei because they're not actively have the mace in front of them. And he just stands there and declares justice upon himself, accepts the justice. And he says as follows: Master of the universe, I have sinned greatly, and you have not exacted from me what I deserve, even 1,000th of what I deserve. In other words, he's basically saying that even though I'm suffering greatly right now, I deserve even worse. And so that's a frightening thing to say. So he wrote in Lefanecha Hashem Elokeinu shetigdor pirtzoseinu pirtzos kol amcha beis Yisrael berachamim, that may it be your will, Hashem, that you fix any breaches among the people of Israel with mercy. Amar Abaya lo mi boy leilin shlamei marhachi. Abaya disagrees. He says a person should not say that statement. A person should not say that I deserve worse. The Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish v'chein Tana mishmei de Reb Yossi lo'olam al yiftach adam piv l'satan. Don't never open up your mouth to the Satan to invite additional suffering upon yourself by saying I deserve worse. It's almost like you're saying bring it on, and that's not appropriate. You're not supposed to invite, open the mouth to the Satan, to give the Satan the opportunity to indict you. Amar Rav Yosef Maikra. Oh, what's the pasuk that where we learn this from? Shnei kimat kistom hayinu. That in Yeshaya it says, we learned this right before Tisha B'av. It says we are almost like the city of Sodom, the Yerushalayim. So Maya Hadr Lahu Navi Shimu Devar Hashem Kitzinei Sidom. So what does the Navi say afterwards? He says, listen to the word of God, you officers of Sodom. In other words, by saying you were almost like Sodom, then Taka you became like Sodom. So don't open up and suggest what's almost about to happen or what you deserve, because God forbid it'll come true. So Kavru es hameis v'chazru v'chulei. So the Mishnah had then said that after they bury the deceased and they come back from the Beis Olam, im yicholun lahaskol v'ligmor ad shelo yagiu l'shura yaschilu. So what they would do is they would make something called a shura. They would make a row of menachamim, of people who would console the mourner on his way out of the Beis Olam. That's what we do still today. We make something called a shura. So if you can get from the grave to the shura, and in that time you can recite all of Kriya Shema, that's when you should recite Kriya Shema. And v'im lav lo yaschilu. But if you're not going to be able to finish Kriya Shema, you shouldn't begin. So in Michol lahaskil v'ligmor es kula in avol perak echad o perak o pasuk echad lo. It's mashma from the Mishnah that you have to have time to finish all three parshios of Kriya Shema. But just to say one paragraph or one pasuk, then you shouldn't even start. Or a minhu, so let's raise a contradiction. Kavru es ameis v'chazru, that if they just finished burying the dead and they're turning away to go to the shura, im yichonu lahaskil v'ligmor afilu perak echad o pasuk echad. So it says that even though they can only finish one parak or even one pasuk, they should say the one parak or the one pasuk. So the Gemara says, you're right. Hachinami kamar. What our Mishnah is saying is the same thing. Our Mishnah is taka saying that if you have time to say even one paragraph or one pasuk, you should do that, but if not, you shouldn't start. Those who are standing in the row, meaning those people who are engaged in the words of Tanchumen for the mace, those. Let's see. The Mishnah had said that those people who are in the inner circle, who actually have the opportunity to extend their condolences, so those are the people who are butter from Kriya Shema. But the people on the outside periphery who aren't even interfacing with the Avel, they are chayiv in Kriya Shema. So Tanu Rabbanan Shura Haroa Penima Petura, V'Sheina Roa Penima Chayeves. You don't have to be mamish on the inside, but as long as you can see the inside circle, so then you're putter. But if there's so many throngs of people that you can't even see what's going on the inside, so then you're chayiv. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer Haboy Machmas Ha'avel Petur Machmas Atzman Chayavim. Rabbi Yehuda says if you come to give honor to the Avel, you're putter from Kriya Shema, and he doesn't differentiate between inner circle and outer circle. Yeah. But if you come out of curiosity to see, hey, what's going on, all these people, so then you're chayiv in Kriya Shema. Okay, next. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Hamotzi Kilayim Bevigdo. This is a related Gemara now. And this Gemara is related to the whole concept that if a person is engaged in a certain mitzvah, he's pater from other mitzvahs. So the Gemara needs to clarify that this doesn't always apply in all situations. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav Hamotzi Kilayim Bevigdo, Post Nafilu B'Shuk, that if you find that you're wearing kilayim on your clothing, let's say you're wearing an $800 suit, and someone says, hey, I just got that suit checked, it's full of shatnas, then even if you're in the middle of the marketplace, you have to strip down to your underwear, and because, why? My taima, ein chachma ve'ein tvuna ve'ein eitzel l'neged Hashem, because there's no such thing as personal honor, personal wisdom, and you can't make your own personal cheshbonos when it comes to God's honor. You have to completely negate any sense of self-importance when it comes to fulfilling Hashem's mitzvahs. Now, obviously, you see that this is in contradistinction to the other things that we've seen before. Loeg l'rush certainly doesn't seem to imply that. We said by loeg l'rush you have to be compassionate for the feelings of the mace, and over here your own personal dignity is at stake, and yet no. Ein chachma ve'ein tfuna ve'ein eitza keneged Hashem. If you're mamish being oider a mitzvah losa say biyadayim, then you have to remove the shatnas right then and there. So, kol makom sheish chilul Hashem in cholkin kavel l'rav. Any place where a chilul Hashem is involved, where you're profaning Hashem by actively violating one of His commandments, then even if you're a great Talmud Chacham, you have to strip. Meisvei So the Gemara says, Kavru asameis v'chazru v'lifneim beis drachim. Look at the following brisa. It says that if they just finished burying the dead, and now they're turning away, and you want to escort the Avel, and there are two possible places where you can walk. Echas tahora ve'echas tameya. One pathway is completely tahor. The other pathway has tumah in its path, and you have a commandment not to become tameh, either because you're a kohen or you're osek the taharos. Let's say, ba b'tahora boin imo b'tahora, ba b'tameya boin imo b'tameya. Yet the Brisa says that it makes no difference. Wherever he goes, you have to follow him, even if he goes in the tameh path, mishum kvodo, out of his honor. So amai lema in chachma vein tvuna l'neged Hashem. Why don't you say that when it comes to doing an aveira, there's no such thing as showing someone else honor? If you don't have to worry about your own dignity, why do you have to worry about this guy's dignity of showing him honor if it involves doing an aveira? Satirgama Rabbi Abba bebeis apras de Rabbanan. The answer is that the tumah that we're discussing over here is not tumah deoraisa. It's tumah de Rabbanan in a field called the Beis Apras, where only the Chachamim were gozer tumah because there may be some corpse remains somewhere in that field. The Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel Menafeach Adam Beis Apras v'holech, as Chazal say that a person has a right to get down on all fours and blow the earth in front of him in order to be able to examine to see that there's no corpse material in front of him, and he's allowed to, even midrabanan, traverse the Beis Apras if he does it carefully. So what you see from here is there's not a tumah d'oraisa here. It's only a tumah that they were gozer midrabanan unless the person not checked carefully. And therefore, when it comes to this situation, the Chachamim said, out of kavod for a person who's in Avelus, will suspend the Yisr d'Rabbanan of Beis Apras. V'amar of Yehuda bar Ashi mishmei d'Rav, Beis Apras shenidash tahor. Another example of how this is only midrabanan is that if it's completely trampled by human feet, then it's considered to be tahor. Tashmad, Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Medalgin hayinu al gabi arono shel meisim likras malchei Yisrael. That Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, who himself was a Kohen, says that ich gedenkt, I remember that we used to jump over the caskets of the deceased in order to greet Jewish kings. And this was true even to greet idolatrous kings, because that also is a mitzvah, to show honor to an idolatrous king, so that you can eventually be able to discern the difference between an idolatrous king and the king Messiah. So the Gemara says, why don't you say when it comes to showing honor to a king, there's no such thing? If it involves doing an Aveira, you can't do an Aveira to show covet to a king. Just like you can't do an Aveira to show covet to yourself. So the Gemara says, Kidarava, the Amar Rava, the Vartora, Ohel Kol Sheyesh Bo Chalal Tefach, Chotzes Bifnei Hatuma, V'Shem Bo Chalal Tefach, and Chotzes Bifnei Hatuma. He says here too, V'Rov Aronos Yesh Ben Chalal Tefach, V'Gazol Sheyesh Ben Mishom Shein Bahem. So basically it works like this. Really there's only a Tumah D'Rabbanan in these caskets, because the situation is like this. Whenever a corpse is encased within a completely sealed container, and there's a airspace of a tefach between the top of his body and the bottom of the ceiling of the container, so then the halacha is that the tumah does not escape the sealed container, and as a result, midioraisa, a kohen can actually go over the box and not contract any tumah. So, but the Chachamim made a takana, and they said that we do not allow a Kohen to traverse any caskets, because a small minority of caskets may not have the sufficient amount of airspace between the corpse and the ceiling of the casket. And therefore, Mishum Kavod Malachim Lo Gazru Bu Rabbanan. And therefore, when it came to showing honor to kings, the Chachamim suspended their Issa de Rabbanan to allow Kohanim to traverse the caskets. Tashma. So we'll listen to the next brisa. Gadol kavod habrios shedoches lo sasa shebetorah. That how great is kavod habrios, is preserving the honor of an individual, that it overrides a mitzvah lo sasa in the Torah. Now, what is this talking about? That's talking about the din of Shabbos Aveda. That if a person finds an Aveda, sees a lost object, and it's not Lefi Chvodo, it's not considered to be commensurate to his honor to engage in the restoration of the lost object, then we don't require him to do so. So, frek the Gemara, Va'amai, Lema, Ein Chachma, Vein Tvuna, Vein Esel, Eneged Hashem. Why don't we say the same thing? That there's no Chachma, excuse me, I jumped the gun. I'm not, this Gemara is not talking about Hashavas Aveda yet. We'll get to that shortly. This Bryce is talking generically, and it says that sometimes you see that even a mitzvah losas, it can be suspended for someone's honor. But why don't we say in Chachma vein Tuna vein Esel neged Hashem? So Tirgama Rav Bar Shava Kamei de Rav Kahana Belav de Lo Saser. So the answer is because the mitzvah losase that is suspended mishum kavod abrios is the mitzvah of lo sasur. Do not deviate from the words of the sages. Meaning only mitzvahs derabanan are suspended. But mitzvahs deorais are not suspended because of kavod abrios. So achichu alei lav de lo saser deoraisi. So they sort of mocked him and they said, since when is the prohibition of lo saser, do not deviate from the words of the sages, a mitzvah deoraisa, which is what was implied in the brisa. So Amar Rav Kahana Gavar Rabba Amar Milsa Lo Sachichu Alei. So Rav Kahana chastised those who mocked him, and they said, he's a great man, do not mock him.
Was the mocker suggesting that he wasn't doing it?
It is actually right. The Torah is telling you to listen to the rabbis. Isn't that what the Gemara saying?
You're saying that the lav of lo saser is a deorais.
Yeah.
So they're saying, so how can you say that it's only a rabbinic law? Okay, so anyway, Rav Kahana says, don't mock him. Kol mili de rabbanan asmuchu alav de lo saser. Umishum kvodo shar rabbana. So Rav Kahana clarified that what he meant to say is that any time that the Chachamim institute a law, they're basing it on the Isser Deoraisa of Lo Sasur, and therefore what he said was absolutely correct. Every rabbinic law has, in a sense, this mitzvah klolius of Lo Sasur, and therefore there's an aspect of a Deoraisa, but ultimately it only has the din of Derabanan as far as its ability to be suspended in the face of Kavod Abrios. But a real Deoraisa that specifically that requires a specific violation of one of the 613 mitzvahs, that we would not suspend because of Kavod Abrios. Okay, we have to go on. I'm sorry. Tashma v'hisalamta mehem pa'amim sha'ata mis'alei mehem u'pa'amim she'nata mis'alei mehem. So this is where we get into the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. I jumped ahead prematurely. It says that there are some times the Torah says that you must, or that you are permitted to hide yourself from returning lost objects. So what does this mean? So haketzad im haya kohen v'hi beveis hakvaros, that if a person is a kohen and the lost object is in a cemetery, and obviously a kohen cannot make himself tameh in order to retrieve the lost object, oh hayazakein beina lefi chavoda, or if he was a venerated sage and it's not commensurate to his honor to engage in the restoration of this lost object, or if the cost of the restoration exceeds the cost of the lost object, in which case, since you're going to be sending the owner the bill, you're doing him a disservice by engaging in the restoration, because you're actually ending costing him more than what it's worth. So in all of those cases, you do not engage in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. Kach ne'amar v'hisalamta. So the Gemara just questions, Amai lema ein chachma vein tuna vein esel leneged Hashem. In that middle case of the venerated sage, why is he exempt from engaging in Hashavas Aveda just because it's not lefi chavoda? Say ein chachma vein tuna vein esel leneged Hashem. So shiny hasam dichsiv v'hisalamta mehem. Because there the Torah gives a special dispensation that when it's not lefi chavodo, then you're potter, but that only applies there. It doesn't apply by other cases. Frek the Gemara v'ligmar mina. Why don't you learn? May use that as the exemplar, as the binyanav for kol Torah kula. That when a mitzvah, that when the performance of a mitzvah will detract from a person's kavod, then the person is potter. Answers the Gemara, isur mimamona lo yalfina. We cannot derive the laws of Isser from the laws of Mammon. Hashavas Aveda is a financial mitzvah, and you cannot adduce from there. Just because I'm exempt from financial obligations to my fellow Jew doesn't mean that I can say that I'm allowed to wear shatnez. Those two are not related to each other. You can't learn one from the other. Toshma v'la achosa. So just a brief outline of what we're about to see in this Gemara over here. The word v'la achoso is written in the context of the prohibition of a nazir from being matame to a mace. But the Torah says a blanket statement that for a nazir, al kol nefesh meis lo yava, that a nazir is not allowed to be matame himself for any deceased. And then it details la'aviv u'li'imo, right? And then it goes into every member of his family. So the Gemara says each member of the family that's detailed in the Torah is coming to teach me an additional halacha. Why does the Torah detail the word achoso? That's sort of like the last one on the list. Im eino inyan l'nazir tenehu inyan to the following. In other words, if it's not being used to teach me any additional halachas to a nazir who cannot be matame, it must be teaching me a halacha about a first dama person who, even when he's not a nazir, but he has compelling reasons not to make himself tameh, meaning that he's going to be doing what? A guy is going to do a mitzvah that requires his state of tahara to remain intact, and the mitzvah that he's doing is such that if he doesn't do this mitzvah, he's going to get kareh, such as he's going to shech the korban pesach or to circumcise his son. And in those situations, if he gets sidetracked and goes ahead and engages in the burial of a deceased, of a corpse, then it will stop him from doing the mitzvah. The shama shemeis lo meis yachol yachzer v'yitamei, and then he hears that someone has passed away. So you think maybe that he should make himself tamei. Amart lo yitama. That the Torah says no, he's not allowed to make himself tamei. But yachol kishem shena mitami lahem kachena mitami lameis mitzvah. So you might think that just like he's not allowed to be a matame for family members, he's not allowed to be matame for a meis mitzvah, which is a person where the Torah says that if there's no one to bury him, there's a special, primal mitzvah that takes primacy over all other mitzvahs, that you have to engage with the burial of the dead. So tamalomar v'la achoso. That's what the word v'la achoso teaches. Only la achoso hu de'eno mitzame. Only for a family member are you not mitzame when you have all of these important mitzvahs to do. Avol mitzame hu l'meis mitzvah. But you are mitzame for a meis mitzvah, even though that being mitzame for a meis mitzvah is going to take you away from being able to fulfill the mitzvahs of Hashem. Now, why are you engaging in a meis mitzvah? Out of honor to the deceased. Hashem says, I want you to show honor to a decedent. He has no one to bury him. We shouldn't leave him lying out. So the Gemara says, Amai, lema ein chachma vein tfuna vein eitzel neged Hashem. Why don't you say that we shouldn't worry about the individual decedent's honor if it's going to take us away from doing mitzvahs of Hashem? So the Gemara answers, Shiny Hasam dichsiv v'la achoso. The Torah says, because over there it says v'la achoso, there's a special Gzeiros HaKosov that says that when it comes to a meis mitzvah, Hashem says, I want you to take his honor more seriously than any other mitzvah, but only in that situation of a meis mitzvah. The ligmar mina, so why don't you learn from there that even in the case of personal dignity versus shatnez, personal dignity takes priority. Shevel taisa shiny, so the Gemara says there, you're engaging in the meis mitzvah causes you to not do the mitzvah of korban pesach and bris milah in a passive. You're violating the mitzvahs of pesach and milah in a passive way by not doing the mitzvah. But by shatnez, by continuing to wear the shatnez, you're proactively violating the aveira, and that says the Gemara, you can't learn from here. You can't apply one to the other. To tell you that out of personal dignity you're allowed to proactively violate shatnez, that you can't learn from here. All you learn from here is that if there's honor involved, if there's dignity or kavod involved, sometimes the Torah gives you a dispensation to desist from doing a mitzvah in a sheval taisa fashion, in a passive fashion, but not to proactively violate a mitzvah. Have a wonderful day.